everyone. Welcome to this lesson. This lesson is going to be a continuation of the last lesson. From the last lesson, we start talking about code blocks in JavaScript, and then we talked about standalone blocks that execution of variables can happen without execution of code blocks can happen independently without being attached to an if statement, a loop, or a function, as we are able to demonstrate by calculating the area of an object using the declaration of two variables and then getting out the output as we were able to see in the last lesson. So in this lesson, we just talked about the standalone blocks, what it means in JavaScript, and taking a step further to see how how things like encapsulation and hoisting works in JavaScript. So standalone blocks gives the standalone. One of the advantages of standalone block is encapsulation. Variables inside the block are only available in the block. This prevents polluting the global scope, keeps the code clean, and reduces the risk of name collision. So when you employ the use of code blocks, which means that every aspect of your program is controlled, inside either maybe a function, a loop, or a statement, or either a standalone code block. This allows to prevent global scope pollution, and then it keeps code clean and reduce the risk of name collision. As long as one variable that is available in the function is limited to that function, it will not affect if we have that same name in another maybe part, like maybe a loop or in an if statement. Then temporary use. If you only need variables for a calculation, the block lets you declare them, use them, and discard them. Look at an example that we had in the last lesson. That example was just for a calculation, and then we only need that variables for calculation. We declare it inside that block, then we use them, and then we got an output. And anything outside from that, you can discard it, because that variable becomes completed once we got the output that we wanted in our browser. Organized code. You can group related variable and statements in their own scope to avoid accidental name conflict without forcing them into a function or an object. This improves readability and avoid accidental name conflict. Use of variable name outside the box. So these are the benefits of standalone blocks, which means that when your code is organized into code blocks, it gives you lots of advantages as maybe a developer or someone working on the project, as it has been laid out here and mentioned. Now, I want to talk about JavaScript hoisting. Hoisting is JavaScript default behavior of moving declarations to the top. We are still going to have another video to talk more about hoisting, but I think we've talked about it here in the earlier videos in the previous video about what it means in JavaScript. In JavaScript, a variable can be declared after it has been used. So when you have a variable that has been used, like an example of when we use car name outside without having declared it and later declare it without function, and then still become globally accessible. That's an example of hoisting. We were able to declare declare that variable after it has been used. So in other words, a variable can be used before it has been declared. If you look at these two statements, you will see that they are interchangeably used. In JavaScript, a variable can be declared after it has been used. In other words, a variable can be used before it has been declared. And I'm going to show an example, the same result, but in two different ways. To understand this, you have to understand type hoisting. And what is hoisting? Hoisting is JavaScript default behavior of moving all declaration to the top of the current scope, to the top of the current script or current function. So all the declarations that you have in a scope, maybe variable declaration stuff, so hoisting will move all those behavior to the top so that execution can start from the top downward. The let and cost keyword, which is also going to be something we have another lesson on to talk about. Variable defined with let and cost are hoisted to the top of the block, but not initialized. So when you have variable declared with let and cost keyword, they are hoisted to the top, which means they are moved to the top of the block, but they are not initialized, which means that you cannot use them unless declared. The block of code is aware of the variable, but it cannot be used until it has been declared. Using a left variable before it is declared will result in reference error. And the same thing with const. If you use a variable declared with const without being declared, it will result in a reference error. The variable is a temporary dead zone from the start of the block until it is declared. So now let me show us this simple example. These two code, they do the same thing, but I will show us in two different ways. So I'm going to make a variable without having declared it. I've used it. Then let me just assign it to something. Document get element by id 1001. Element dot inner html. It's the usual way. I'm just breaking it here. Oops. Such. And then I will come down and say, okay, var x. Now, look at it. The result of this output is 5, which means that Hostings allows me to assign this variable even before it is being declared here. And you can see that I am getting the correct output, which is 5, as you can see on my screen. Now, I can as well now declare my variable before use. This is initializing it, and then assign it a value and say 5. And then do the same thing and say element equals document.get element, and the value of x is 5. So you can see that in the first example, I have not declared the variable, but I've assigned it. Then I came down and declared it. But in this example, I declare it, I assign it, and then it's still giving me the same result. So that is hoisting for you in JavaScript, which is talking about the fact that a variable can be declared after it has been used. And in other words, a variable can be used before it has been declared. So in the next lesson, we move forward. I'll talk in greater details about about let and post keyword. Thank you, and I will see you then. Don't forget to practice.